He fixed the Queen's ship for free, not knowing she'd been testing husbands. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The orbital dock at Station Kepler-4 was a graveyard of broken dreams and failed machinery, and Nathan Brooks had seen every kind of disaster that could befall a starship. He wiped his grease-stained hands on an even greasier rag, surveying the gutted engine core of a mining hauler that had seen better days 3 decades ago. Life as an independent mechanic on a frontier station meant scraping by, taking whatever jobs came through the airlock, and never quite making enough to call it comfortable. Nathan Brooks had not planned on becoming the most talked-about mechanic in 3-star systems, nor had he imagined that fixing a broken hyperdrive coupling would fundamentally alter the course of his existence. He was 32 years old, lean and weathered from years of crawling through engine compartments, with permanently blackened fingernails and a gift for understanding machines that others found mystifying. His reputation was solid among the station's regular traffic, but he was nobody special, just another human trying to make an honest living in a galaxy that sometimes felt too big and too indifferent. The day everything changed started like any other. Nathan was elbow-deep in a coolant manifold when the docking alarm chimed, announcing a new arrival. He barely glanced up, focused on the stubborn bolt that refused to yield. His small repair bay occupied a corner of the lower docking ring, a cramped space filled with tools, spare parts, and the lingering smell of machine oil and recycled air. The walls were plastered with diagnostic charts and handwritten notes, a organized chaos that made perfect sense to him and no one else. The ship that had just docked was designated Bay 17, which meant it was 2 slots down from his workspace. Nathan did not pay it much attention. Ships came and went constantly on Kepler-4, a way station positioned along one of the minor trade routes between human and Valerian space. The Valorians were a tall, elegant species known for their aristocratic culture and advanced technology, though Nathan had only dealt with a handful of them over the years. They tended to keep to their own mechanics, viewing human engineering as crude and simplistic. He was wrestling the manifold back into place when he heard the footsteps. Light, measured, with an odd clicking quality that suggested heeled boots on metal decking. Nathan looked up to see a figure in the doorway of his bay, backlit by the harsh fluorescent lighting of the corridor. She was Valerian, that much was immediately obvious. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with the characteristically elongated proportions of her species and skin that shimmered with a faint iridescent quality, like oil on water. Her features were angular and fine-boned, with large eyes that held an amber luminescence. She wore traveling clothes that somehow managed to look both practical and elegant, deep purple fabrics that caught the light and shifted in color as she moved. Her hair, if it could be called that, was a flowing mass of crystalline strands that moved with a life of their own, ranging in color from deep violet to pale silver. Nathan straightened, wiping his hands again in a futile gesture. He was immediately conscious of how he must look, covered in grime and smelling of coolant, facing someone who appeared to have stepped out of a luxury catalog. The Valerian woman inclined her head in greeting, a gesture that conveyed both respect and a subtle expectation of deference. When she spoke, her voice had a musical quality, the words in perfect though accented standard. "I am told you are Nathan Brooks, the mechanic," she said. "That's me," Nathan replied, trying to keep his tone professional. "What can I do for you?" The woman stepped fully into his workspace, her eyes scanning the cluttered interior with an expression Nathan could not quite read. Valerian faces were harder to interpret than human ones, their emotional expressions subtle and often conveyed through the movement of their crystalline hair and the slight color shifts in their skin. "My vessel has developed a malfunction in the hyperdrive coupling," she explained. "The failure occurred suddenly during transit, forcing me to drop out of hyperspace prematurely. I was fortunate to reach this station. I require the services of a mechanic to assess and repair the damage." Nathan nodded. "Sure, I can take a look. What kind of ship are we talking about?" "A Solarian-class courier," she replied. "Bay 17. Nathan felt his eyebrows rise. A Solarian courier was serious hardware, one of the fastest and most advanced ship designs in Valerian space. They were also notoriously complex, filled with systems that required specialized knowledge and expensive parts. He had never worked on one before, though he had studied their schematics out of professional curiosity. "That's pretty high-end machinery," he said carefully. "I'm not sure I have the parts for a Valerian hyperdrive on hand, and they can be expensive to source." The woman waved a hand dismissively. "Cost is not a concern. I simply need the repair completed as quickly as possible. I was informed that you are skilled, that you possess an intuitive understanding of mechanical systems that transcends formal training." Nathan felt a flush of pride at the compliment, though he tried not to show it. "Well, I do my best. Let me grab my diagnostic kit, and we'll see what we're dealing with." He collected his tools, slinging a heavy bag over his shoulder, and followed the Valerian woman out of his bay and down the corridor. She moved with a gliding grace that made her seem to float rather than walk, her crystalline hair swaying behind her. As they walked, Nathan tried to make conversation. "I don't think I caught your name," he said. She glanced back at him, and for a moment something flickered across her face, an emotion he could not identify. "You may call me Saralith," she said. "Nice to meet you, Saralith. You traveling alone?" "For the moment, yes," she replied, "though I expect that will change soon." They reached Bay 17, and the access hatch slid open at Saralith's touch. Nathan followed her inside and stopped short, momentarily stunned by what he saw. The interior of the ship was magnificent, all flowing curves and luminescent panels, with a design aesthetic that blended function and beauty in a way human engineering rarely achieved. Everything gleamed with perfect maintenance, from the polished deck plates to the softly glowing control surfaces. "The engine room is aft," Saralith said, gesturing toward a curved corridor. "I will leave you to your work. Please inform me when you have completed your assessment." Nathan made his way to the engine compartment, his professional eye cataloging details as he went. The ship was immaculate, clearly expensive, and equipped with systems he recognized from technical manuals but had never seen in person. When he reached the engine room, he let out a low whistle. The hyperdrive core was a work of art, a crystalline matrix suspended in a magnetic containment field, pulsing with residual energy. He set down his toolkit and began his examination. The diagnostic scanner confirmed what Saralith had described, a fractured coupling in the field generator that regulated the hyperdrive's spatial compression. It was a serious problem, but not catastrophic, the kind of thing that would prevent the ship from entering hyperspace, but would not cause immediate danger. Nathan traced the system pathways, following the energy flows and checking each component. The Valerian systems were elegant but delicate, designed with precision tolerances that left little room for improvisation. As he worked, he began to notice something odd. Several of the components showed signs of deliberate stress, or patterns that suggested they had been pushed beyond normal operating parameters. It was subtle, the kind of thing only someone with his experience would spot, but it was definitely there. Even more curious, the fracture in the coupling itself had characteristics that seemed almost intentional, as if someone had carefully induced a failure that would be serious enough to require immediate repair, but not dangerous enough to risk the ship or its occupant. Nathan frowned, running his scanner over the component again. It made no sense. Why would anyone deliberately sabotage their own ship? He pushed the question aside and focused on the repair. The coupling would need to be replaced, and while he did not have an exact match in his inventory, he had something that might work with some creative modification. Valerian and human technology operated on similar principles, even if the implementation differed. If he could adapt a human field regulator to interface with the Valerian systems, it should restore functionality. Nathan spent the next 3 hours immersed in the work, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of problem-solving and mechanical manipulation. He fabricated adapter brackets, recalibrated energy flows, and coaxed the hybrid system into harmony. It was challenging work, the kind that required both technical knowledge and intuitive understanding, and he loved it. When machines cooperated with him like this, when the solutions emerged from some place deeper than conscious thought, he felt truly alive. Finally, he activated the repaired system and watched as the hyperdrive core stabilized, its pulsing light settling into a steady, healthy glow. The readings on his scanner confirmed full functionality. Nathan allowed himself a satisfied smile. It was not pretty by Valerian standards, His human components looked crude next to the elegant crystalline technology, but it worked perfectly. He found Sarilith in what appeared to be a meditation chamber, seated on a low platform surrounded by softly glowing orbs. She rose as he entered, her crystalline hair shifting to a lighter shade of violet. "The repair is complete," Nathan said. "The coupling is replaced, and the hyperdrive is fully operational. I used some human components to make the fix, so it might not be as elegant as the original Valerian parts, but it will hold. You should be able to make it to any major port where you can get proper replacements if you want." Sarilith approached the doorway, studying his face with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. "You completed the repair in 3 hours," she said. "The estimates I received from other mechanics suggested it would take at least 2 days. Nathan shrugged. "Well, I had the right parts on hand, more or less. And once you understand how the systems talk to each other, it is not that complicated. The hard part was just making the human and Valerian tech play nice together." "I see," Sarilith said softly. "And what do I owe you for this service?" Nathan did some quick mental math. The parts he had used were not particularly expensive, and the labor, while skilled, had only taken a few hours. He could charge a premium for working on such an advanced ship, but something in Sarilith's manner suggested she was not flying on unlimited resources despite the quality of her vessel. Maybe she was a courier for hire, or a noble fallen on hard times. The galaxy was full of people trying to make their way. "How about 200 credits?" he said. "That will cover the parts and my time." Sarilith's crystalline hair flared briefly, a reaction Nathan had learned indicated surprise or strong emotion in Valorians. 200 credits, she repeated, "for a hyperdrive repair on a Solarian courier. Is that too much?" Nathan asked, suddenly worried he had misjudged. "I can go lower if that is a problem. I know parts can be pricey out here." Sarilith was silent for a long moment, her amber eyes searching his face. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into a pouch at her belt and withdrew not a credit chip, but a small, ornate device that Nathan did not recognize. She held it out to him. "I do not have credits readily available at this moment," she said, her voice carrying a strange quality Nathan could not quite identify. "But I offer you this as payment. It is worth considerably more than 200 credits." Nathan took the device reluctantly, turning it over in his hands. It was beautiful, made of some kind of silver metal inlaid with colored crystals that glowed faintly. He had no idea what it was or what it did. "I appreciate the offer," he said, "but I don't really need fancy gadgets. Tell you what, just don't worry about it. Consider it a freebie. Everybody needs a hand sometimes, right?" The change in Sarilith was dramatic. Her crystalline hair went completely still, then began to shift through a rapid spectrum of colors. Her skin flickered with waves of iridescence. Her eyes widened, and for several seconds, she simply stared at him in what appeared to be complete shock. "You," she said slowly, "you refuse payment entirely?" "It's not a big deal," Nathan said, uncomfortable with her reaction. "Really, it was a pretty straightforward fix once I figured out the interface issue. I'm happy to help." Sarilith took a step back, and Nathan realized with alarm that her hands were trembling. She pressed one palm to her chest in a gesture that looked significant, though he did not understand its meaning. "Nathan Brooks," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you have any idea what you have just done?" "Fixed your hyperdrive?" Nathan offered, genuinely confused by her intensity. Sarilith made a sound that might have been laughter or might have been something else entirely. She turned away from him, her shoulders shaking. When she turned back, there were tears running down her face, actual tears, which Nathan had not known Valorians could produce. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Several things, in fact. But first, I must ask you a question. What do you know of Valerian customs regarding marriage?" Nathan blinked, completely thrown by the sudden change in subject. Not much. I know Valorians take it pretty seriously. I think there are a bunch of formal rituals and stuff." "Indeed," Sarilith said. "Among my people, marriage is not merely a personal union, but a political and spiritual bond that shapes the very fabric of our society. For those of high rank, the selection of a spouse is a matter of profound importance, one that can determine the fate of entire regions." "Okay," Nathan said slowly, not sure where this was going. "There is a tradition," Sarilith continued, "among the royal houses of Valoria. When an heir to significant power reaches maturity, and must choose a spouse, they sometimes employ what is called the trial of true character. The heir, disguised and traveling in secret, presents themselves to potential suitors as someone in need, someone vulnerable. The trial tests not wealth or status or political acumen, but fundamental character, generosity, kindness, competence, the qualities that make a worthy partner rather than merely a politically advantageous one. Nathan felt a cold sensation spreading through his chest. "Oh no," he said. Saralitha's crystalline hair flared brilliant gold, and she drew herself up to her full height. Her entire bearing changed, from the posture of a weary traveler to something else, something regal and commanding. When she spoke again, her voice carried an unmistakable authority. "I am Saralith Vasniran, crown princess of the Valerian ascendancy, heir to the celestial throne and keeper of the seven lights. For the past 4 months, I have been traveling the outer regions in secret, testing those who were put forward as potential consorts. 63 candidates, all of them carefully selected by the noble houses and my advisors. Each was presented with the same scenario, a stranger in need of help with a problem that would require effort and resources to solve." Nathan's mind reeled. 63 candidates, he repeated numbly. Saralith nodded. Every single one demanded payment commensurate with my apparent value. Some charged exorbitant fees, seeing an opportunity to profit from someone they perceived as wealthy but desperate. Others refused to help at all, deeming the task beneath them or too difficult. A few completed the work, but with such poor quality or such resentment that they failed the trial as surely as those who refused. Not one, Nathan Brooks, not a single candidate in 63 attempts, offered to help me freely and without expectation of reward. Nathan felt like the deck was tilting under his feet. This had to be some kind of mistake, some cosmic joke. He was just a mechanic, a grease-stained human who fixed broken ships in a nowhere station on the edge of civilized space. "I don't," he started, then stopped. "I don't understand. Why would you, why me? I'm nobody." Saralith stepped closer to him, her eyes searching his face with an intensity that made him want to look away, but also held him transfixed. "That is precisely the point," she said gently. "You are nobody special by the standards of wealth or rank or political power. You are simply a skilled tradesman living an honest life. And when presented with someone in need, your first instinct was not to calculate advantage or demand compensation, but to offer help freely because it was the right thing to do. Do you have any comprehension of how rare that is? How precious?" "This is insane," Nathan said. "You can't. There has to be some kind of mistake. The trial was for Valerian nobles, right? I'm human. That has to disqualify me or something." Saralitha's expression softened. "The trial seeks a worthy spouse, regardless of species. There is precedent for cross-species unions in the royal line, though it has been many generations since the last occurred. The bond is what matters, not the biology. And besides," she added with a slight smile, "I was the one who insisted that the candidate pool not be restricted to Valorians. My advisors were quite resistant to the idea, but I convinced them that true worth transcends species." Nathan's head was spinning. This could not be happening. Things like this did not happen to people like him. He was about to protest again when Saralith held up a hand. "I understand this is overwhelming," she said. "I am not asking you to decide anything at this moment. But by the laws of the trial, you have passed where all others failed. If you are willing, I would ask you to return with me to the capital, to meet with my family and advisors, to see if there is potential for something more than a chance encounter in a repair bay." "And if I say no?" Nathan asked. "Then I will thank you for your kindness, pay you properly for your work, and depart. You will have a very interesting story to tell, but nothing more. The choice is entirely yours. I will not compel you, nor will there be any negative consequence for refusal. You owe me nothing." Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the royal bearing to something else. He saw the exhaustion in the set of her shoulders, the loneliness in her eyes. She had spent 4 months traveling in secret, testing and being disappointed by dozens of candidates, each failure likely confirming some fear that she would never find someone who saw her as more than a title and a throne. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. Why is this so important to you? Arranged marriages are pretty common among nobility, right? Why go through all this trouble to find someone who passes some test? Saralith was quiet for a moment, her crystalline hair shifting to a deep, contemplative blue. Because I have seen what happens when rulers choose power over partnership, she said finally. I have watched my own parents grow distant and cold, bound by political necessity rather than genuine affection. I have seen the noble houses treat marriage as nothing more than a transaction, a merger of assets. And I refuse to spend the next 3 centuries, for that is how long I will likely rule, shackled to someone who sees me as a means to an end rather than a person worth knowing. 3 centuries, Nathan echoed. That's how long Valorians live. If we are fortunate, yes. Does that frighten you? Honestly, yeah, a little. Humans are lucky to make it to 100, maybe 120 with good genetics and better medical care. Saralith nodded. That is a consideration, certainly. But there are ways to address such disparities, medical interventions, and genetic treatments that can extend human lifespan significantly. It is not insurmountable if both parties are willing. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, leaving it standing up in grease-stained spikes. This is completely insane, he said. You know that, right? I'm a mechanic. I live in a converted storage bay. My most valuable possession is a set of torque wrenches. I don't know anything about being royalty or politics or any of that stuff. Saralith smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look younger and more vulnerable. I know, she said. Is that not wonderful? Despite everything, Nathan found himself laughing. It was absurd, absolutely absurd, and yet there was something appealing about the sheer impossibility of it. Here was this incredibly powerful, unimaginably important person, and she was asking him, Nathan Brooks, the guy who ate instant noodles for dinner more often than not, to consider being her partner. Okay, he said. Okay, I'll do it. I'll go with you, meet your family, see what this is all about. But I'm not promising anything beyond that. If it turns out I'm completely unsuited for this, which seems likely, then we shake hands and part as friends. Deal? Saralith's crystalline hair flared brilliant gold again, and her eyes shone with something that might have been tears, or might have been joy, or might have been both. Deal, she said. The journey to the Valerian homeworld took 5 days, even with the repaired hyperdrive operating at full capacity. Nathan spent most of that time in a state of mild panic, alternating between excitement and the certainty that he was making a terrible mistake. Saralith gave him access to the ship's extensive library, and he threw himself into learning everything he could about Valerian culture, history, and protocol. What he learned was both fascinating and terrifying. The Valerian ascendancy was one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in known space, a society built on complex hierarchies of honor, duty, and artistic achievement. They valued beauty and elegance, not as superficial qualities, but as reflections of inner worth and spiritual refinement. Their technology was advanced beyond anything humans had developed. Their cities were living works of art, and their political structures were so intricate that Nathan's head spun trying to understand them. Saralith spent hours with him, patiently explaining customs and answering his endless questions. She was surprisingly easy to talk to, once the initial shock wore off. She had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard, and she seemed genuinely interested in his life and experiences, asking him about his work, his childhood on Earth, his decision to become a mechanic. What Nathan gradually came to understand was that beneath the regal bearing and the political importance, Saralith was lonely. She had been raised in isolation, educated by the finest tutors, surrounded by servants and advisors, but few real friends. Everyone she met wanted something from her: access to power, political favors, reflected glory. His complete lack of interest in those things, his initial ignorance of who she even was, made him unique in her experience. On the 3rd day of the journey, they were sharing a meal in the ship's dining area when Saralith asked him a question that had clearly been on her mind. Do you regret agreeing to come with me? Nathan paused, considering the question seriously. I don't know yet, he said honestly. This is all way outside my experience. I keep expecting to wake up and find out it was all a dream brought on by bad station food. But no, I don't regret it. Even if this all falls apart, even if your family takes one look at me and decides I'm completely inappropriate, I'll have had an adventure. I'll have seen things most humans never will. That's worth something. Saralith's crystalline hair shifted to a warm amber. You have an unusual perspective on life, she observed. Most of the candidates I tested were obsessed with status, with advancement, with what they could gain. You seem content with what you have. Nathan shrugged. I learned a long time ago that happiness doesn't come from having more stuff or being more important. It comes from doing work you're good at, treating people decently, and finding small moments of joy wherever you can. I like fixing things. I like the challenge of taking something broken and making it work again. That's enough for me. And if you were to become my consort, Saralith said quietly, what would you want from that life? Nathan thought about it. Honestly, I want to keep working with machines in some capacity. I'd go crazy if I had to spend all my time at formal events and political meetings. And I'd want to be useful, not just decorative. I don't know what that would look like in your world, but I need to feel like I was contributing something real. Saralith reached across the table and took his hand, her skin warm and slightly electric against his. That can be arranged, she said. In fact, I have been considering a proposal for some time, one that my advisors have dismissed as impractical. The Ascendancy has thousands of worlds, millions of ships, infrastructure that spans star systems. We have advanced technology, but we have also become complacent, relying on automated systems and standardized solutions. What we lack is people with your kind of practical, intuitive understanding of how things actually work. I have been thinking about establishing a new technical academy, one that would combine Valerian theoretical knowledge with the kind of hands-on problem-solving that humans excel at. You want me to start a school? Nathan asked, intrigued despite himself. I want you to help me build a bridge between our peoples, Saralith said. Humans are newcomers to galactic civilization, but you bring perspectives and skills that we have lost or never had. Your species thrives on improvisation, on making do with what you have, on finding creative solutions to impossible problems. Those are valuable qualities. Imagine what we could accomplish by combining Valerian resources and human ingenuity. Nathan felt a spark of genuine excitement. That could actually be amazing, he said. I've always thought that human and Valerian engineering could complement each other really well. We approach problems from completely different angles. They talked for hours about the possibilities, the barriers that would need to be overcome, the resistance they would face from traditionalists on both sides. Nathan found himself drawn into Saralith's vision, seeing the potential for something genuinely meaningful. This was not about titles or power. This was about building something that could improve lives across multiple worlds. On the 5th day, they dropped out of hyperspace near Valoria Prime, and Nathan got his first look at the Valerian homeworld. He stood in the observation deck, pressed against the transparent viewport, and felt his breath catch. The planet was beautiful beyond description, a jewel of blue and green and violet hanging in space, surrounded by a network of orbital structures that looked like delicate filigree work in metal and crystal. Cities dotted the surface, each one a work of art, their spires and domes catching the light of the system's twin suns. It's incredible, Nathan whispered. Saralith stood beside him, her reflection visible in the viewport. This is home, she said simply. And if you choose it, it could be yours as well. They docked at the primary orbital station, a massive structure that dwarfed anything Nathan had ever seen. As soon as the airlock cycled open, they were met by a delegation of Valerian officials, all of them tall and elegant and radiating barely concealed shock at Nathan's presence. Saralith handled them with practiced ease, issuing instructions and deflecting questions with a polite firmness that made it clear she would explain everything in her own time. Nathan was escorted to guest quarters that were larger and more luxurious than any space he had ever inhabited. The rooms were decorated in flowing, organic shapes, with furniture that seemed to grow from the floor and walls that shifted color based on his mood and the ambient light. He was provided with clothing appropriate to his new status, garments that adapted to his body and somehow made him look almost presentable despite his rough-worn appearance. The next morning, he was summoned to meet Saralith's family. Nathan walked through corridors that felt more like art galleries than hallways, past Valorians who stopped to stare at him with undisguised curiosity. He was escorted into a vast chamber filled with natural light streaming through crystal panels. And there, seated on thrones that seemed carved from single pieces of luminescent stone, were the rulers of the Valerian Ascendancy. Emperor Theron Vasniran was imposing even by Valerian standards, nearly 8 feet tall, with crystalline hair that cascaded down his back in shades of silver and gold. Empress Merala was smaller but no less commanding, her features sharp and her eyes like chips of amber. They watched Nathan approach with expressions he could not read. Sarilith stepped forward and performed a formal bow that Nathan tried to replicate, probably badly. She spoke in the Valerian tongue, fluid and musical, for several minutes. Her parents listened without interrupting, though Nathan saw the Emperor's crystalline hair shift through several colors. When Sarilith finished, there was a long silence. Then Emperor Theron spoke, his voice deep and resonant. In standard, for Nathan's benefit, he said, "So you are the human who passed the trial of true character." "Yes, sir," Nathan said, then wondered if sir was the right form of address. "Your Majesty?" He wasn't sure. The Emperor's expression might have been amusement. "You repaired my daughter's vessel and refused payment." "Why?" Nathan took a breath, knowing his answer mattered more than he could probably comprehend. "Because she needed help, and I could provide it. Where I come from, that's just what you do. You help people when you can. I didn't know who she was, but even if I had, I would have done the same thing. A person in need is a person in need, regardless of their title." Empress Merala leaned forward slightly. "And what do you want from us, Nathan Brooks? What do you hope to gain from this association with our daughter?" Nathan met her gaze directly, refusing to look away even though every instinct screamed that he was being presumptuous. "Honestly, I don't want anything from you. I came here because Sarilith asked me to, because I wanted to see if there might be something real between us beyond a chance meeting. I'm not interested in power or wealth or status. I'm a mechanic. I fix things. That's what I'm good at, and that's what makes me happy. If there's a place for someone like me in your daughter's life, great. If not, I'll thank you for the incredible experience and go back to my repair bay with no hard feelings." The silence that followed was so profound that Nathan could hear his own heartbeat. The Emperor and Empress exchanged a look, some communication passing between them that Nathan could not interpret. Then, slowly, Emperor Theron began to smile. "Sarilith," the Emperor said, turning to his daughter, "you have chosen well. This human has more courage and honesty than most of the nobles who have graced this chamber. If he is willing, and if you are certain, you have our blessing." Sarilith's crystalline hair flared brilliant gold, and Nathan saw tears streaming down her face. She crossed to her parents and embraced them, something that clearly surprised them but which they returned. When she turned back to Nathan, her face was radiant. The next weeks were a blur of activity. Nathan was formally introduced to the court, which created exactly the scandal Sarilith had predicted. The noble houses were outraged, offended, and in some cases openly hostile to the idea of a human, a commoner, a mere mechanic, becoming consort to the crown princess. There were protests, formal complaints, and even a few thinly veiled threats. Nathan weathered it all with a kind of bemused patience. He refused to be intimidated by people whose primary objection seemed to be that he had not been born into the right family or the right species. When challenged about his qualifications, he simply pointed out that he had passed a trial that 63 carefully selected Valerian nobles had failed. When questioned about his worth, he offered to demonstrate his skills in any practical test they cared to devise. The turning point came during a formal gathering of the noble houses, a ritual event where grievances could be aired before the imperial family. One particularly vocal lord, a merchant prince named Taldarin, stood before the assembled court and declared that Nathan's selection made a mockery of Valerian tradition and honor. He demanded that Nathan prove himself worthy through a formal challenge. Sarilith started to object, but Nathan placed a gentle hand on her arm. "What kind of challenge?" he asked Taldarin directly. The Valerian lord smirked, clearly thinking he had maneuvered Nathan into a trap. "A test of practical skill," he said. "You claim to be a master of machinery. Very well. I propose a contest. You will be given a complex mechanical problem, something that requires both theoretical knowledge and practical ability to solve. If you succeed, I will withdraw my objection. If you fail, you will acknowledge your unsuitability and depart Valoria." Nathan looked at Sarilith, who was clearly worried but gave him a small nod of support. He turned back to Taldarin. "All right," he said. "I accept. What's the problem?" Taldarin's smile widened. The Imperial Fleet's flagship, the Radiant Dawn, has been experiencing intermittent failures in its primary power distribution network for over a year. Our finest engineers have been unable to isolate the cause. Diagnostics show no abnormalities, yet the failures persist, growing more frequent. Find and fix the problem within 3 days, and you will have proven your worth. A murmur ran through the assembled nobles. The Radiant Dawn was the pride of the Valerian fleet, a vessel so advanced that entire teams of specialists were required to maintain it. The power distribution problem had become legendary, a puzzle that had defied solution despite the best efforts of the Empire's technical experts. Nathan felt a flutter of nervousness, but pushed it down. 3 days, he said. I'll need access to the ship's systems, all maintenance logs, and the freedom to work without interference. Granted, Emperor Theron said, his voice cutting through the whispers. Nathan Brooks, you have the full resources of the Imperial House at your disposal. Taldarin, you will abide by the result of this challenge, whatever it may be. Nathan spent the first day aboard the Radiant Dawn simply observing. He walked through the massive vessel, feeling its rhythms, listening to the sounds of its systems. The Valerian engineers assigned to assist him were polite but skeptical, clearly expecting him to fail. He ignored their doubt and focused on the ship itself. The power distribution network was a marvel of engineering, a web of crystalline conduits that channeled energy from the ship's fusion cores to every system aboard. The intermittent failures were subtle, brief fluctuations that caused no lasting damage, but which could potentially cascade into something catastrophic during combat or critical maneuvers. Nathan reviewed maintenance logs going back 5 years, tracking every instance of the failure, mapping their frequency and location. The Valerian engineers had been thorough, testing every component, replacing suspect parts, running diagnostic programs that should have caught any malfunction. But they had found nothing. On the second day, Nathan did something the Valerian engineers had not thought to do. He stopped looking at the power distribution network in isolation and started examining how it interacted with other systems. Valerian engineering was elegant and specialized, each system designed to perform its function with maximum efficiency. But that specialization sometimes meant they missed the interactions between systems, the cascade effects that could occur when multiple components influenced each other in unexpected ways. He noticed that the power fluctuations always occurred when certain combinations of systems were active simultaneously, the hyperdrive spooling up while the defensive shields were at full strength and the long-range sensors were in active scanning mode. Individually, none of these systems stressed the power network. But together, in that specific combination, they created a harmonic resonance in the crystalline conduits, a vibration at precisely the wrong frequency. The solution, once he saw it, was almost absurdly simple. The conduits needed dampeners to absorb the harmonic resonance, tiny adjustments that would prevent the vibration from building to the point where it caused fluctuations. It was the kind of practical fix that required no new parts, no theoretical breakthroughs, just an understanding of how real systems behaved under complex conditions. Nathan implemented the fix on the afternoon of the second day and ran the ship through every combination of system activations he could devise. The power distribution remained rock-steady. No fluctuations, no failures, no problems. When he presented his findings to the assembled engineers, there was a long silence. Then the chief engineer, a grizzled Valerian who had spent decades maintaining the Imperial fleet, began to laugh. It was a sound of pure delight mixed with chagrin. Harmonics, he said, shaking his head. We never thought to check for harmonic interactions. We were so focused on the individual systems that we missed the forest for the trees. This human sees what we could not. Nathan completed the formal demonstration before the court on the morning of the third day, with Taldarin and the other nobles watching. The Radiant Dawn systems performed flawlessly under stress tests that would have triggered the failures dozens of times previously. When the final test concluded, Nathan turned to Taldarin and said simply, "Fixed." The merchant prince's expression was a mixture of anger and grudging respect. He performed a formal bow, deeper than Nathan had seen any Valerian give to a human. "You have proven your worth, Nathan Brooks," he said, his voice tight. "I withdraw my objection." The Emperor stood, and the court fell silent. "Let it be known throughout the Ascendancy," he declared, that Nathan Brooks has demonstrated not only skill but wisdom, not only knowledge but the humility to see what others missed. He is worthy to stand beside our daughter, and any who question this will answer to the throne itself. The formal bonding ceremony took place 1 month later, a spectacle that combined Valerian tradition with elements Nathan chose to represent his human heritage. The ceremony was held in the crystal gardens of the Imperial Palace, beneath a dome that showed the stars in perfect clarity. Thousands attended, nobles and commoners, Valorians and representatives from dozens of other species, including a delegation from Earth who looked just as overwhelmed as Nathan felt. Seralith was radiant in ceremonial robes that shifted color with every movement, her crystalline hair woven with strands of precious metals. Nathan wore formal attire that somehow managed to honor both Valerian elegance and human simplicity. As they spoke the ancient vows, binding their lives together in words that had been used for millennia, Nathan felt the weight of history and the possibility of the future pressing down on him in equal measure. When the ceremony concluded and they were presented to the assembled crowd as consort and princess, the cheers were deafening. Nathan looked out at the sea of faces, Valerian and human and everything in between, and felt something settle inside him. This was real. This was his life now. The years that followed were not easy. Nathan faced opposition from conservative factions, dealt with the constant pressure of public scrutiny, and struggled to find his place in a world so different from anything he had known. But Seralith was beside him every step of the way, her strength complementing his, her vision giving direction to his practical skills. Together, they established the Institute of Integrated Engineering, a revolutionary academy that brought together Valerian theoretical knowledge and human practical innovation. Students from both species and dozens of others learned to approach problems from multiple angles, to value both elegance and effectiveness, to see the beauty in solutions that worked rather than just solutions that looked impressive. Nathan never stopped being a mechanic at heart. He maintained a workshop in the palace, a space filled with tools and parts, and the smell of machine oil that drove the palace staff to distraction. He spent hours there, teaching students, working on projects, and occasionally fixing things that the sophisticated Valerian technology had deemed irreparable. It became something of a legend among the common people, the story of the consort who still got his hands dirty, who never forgot where he came from. 5 years after the bonding ceremony, Nathan stood in that workshop late one evening, working on a small repair. The door opened, and Seralith entered, moving with the quiet grace that still took his breath away even after all this time. She had changed out of her formal robes into simple traveling clothes, and her crystalline hair was loose around her shoulders. "Working late again?" she asked, a note of amusement in her voice. "Just finishing up," Nathan replied, setting down his tools. "What brings you down to the grease pit?" Seralith smiled and held out a small device. "I was hoping you might take a look at this. It seems to have developed a malfunction." Nathan took the device and recognized it immediately. It was the ornate piece she had offered him as payment that first day on Station Kepler-4, the one he had refused. "What does it do?" he asked, turning it over in his hands. "It is a bonding token," Seralith explained. "When two Valorians decide to commit their lives to one another, they exchange such tokens. They are keyed to the genetic signatures of both individuals and pulse with light when they are close together. Mine has been dim for years, dormant, but recently, it has begun to glow again." She reached out and placed her hand over his, pressing the token between their palms. Immediately, it flared to brilliant life, warm and radiant. Nathan looked at it in wonder, then up at Seralith's face. "I wanted to give this to you that day," she said softly. "Even then, some part of me knew. But the trial required that I offer something impersonal, something that would not influence your choice. Now, 5 years later, I want to give it to you again, but this time as what it truly is. A promise, a bond, a recognition that what we have is real and lasting." Nathan closed his fingers around the token, feeling its warmth, its pulse that matched his heartbeat and hers. "I don't need a token to know that," he said, "but I'll treasure it anyway." They stood together in the workshop, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, the elegant princess and the grease-stained mechanic, and Nathan marveled at the impossible journey that had brought them to this moment. He had fixed a broken ship for free, not knowing he was being tested, not knowing it would change his life. And he would not change a single thing. 10 years after Nathan Brooks first met Saralith on Station Kepler-4, the Institute of Integrated Engineering had campuses on 17 worlds and had graduated thousands of students. The techniques developed there had revolutionized ship design, infrastructure maintenance, and technological development across multiple species. Human and Valerian engineers worked side by side, learning from each other, building things that neither species could have achieved alone. Nathan stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city, watching the sun set over spires and domes that had become familiar and beloved. Saralith joined him, slipping her hand into his, and they stood in comfortable silence. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The simple life, the repair bay on the station?" "Sometimes," Nathan admitted. "But then I think about everything we have built, all the lives we have touched, and I realize this is just fixing things on a larger scale. That is all I ever wanted, to take what's broken and make it work again. I just have a bigger toolkit now." Saralith laughed, the sound like crystal chimes in the evening air. "A bigger toolkit," she repeated. "That is one way to describe the resources of an empire." They watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky, countless points of light representing countless worlds, countless possibilities. And Nathan thought about the choices that had led him here, the decision to help someone in need without expectation of reward, the willingness to take a chance on something impossibly beyond his experience, the determination to prove himself worthy not through grand gestures, but through simple competence and honest effort. He had been nobody special, just a mechanic fixing a broken ship. But that single act of kindness, that moment of seeing another person's need and responding to it, had opened a door to a life he could never have imagined. And the key to it all had been the simplest thing in the world, being decent, being helpful, being human. In the years to come, the story would be told across human space and beyond, a tale that became legend. The mechanic and the princess, the commoner who passed a test that nobles failed, the human who won an empire's respect by refusing to be anything other than himself. Children would hear it and dream of their own impossible adventures. Engineers would tell it to remind themselves that the simplest solutions were often the best. And somewhere on a forgotten frontier station, a new generation of mechanics would work on broken ships and maybe, just maybe, wonder if their next customer might be someone extraordinary in disguise. But for Nathan Brooks, standing on a balcony with the woman he loved, watching the stars emerge over an alien world that had become home, the story was simply his life. And it was more than enough. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.